Hello, hello. This is Irene with SaugaTalks. Hello, thank you everybody for joining. Thank you. I'm Irene Lakovetsky. I host conversation with fascinating people in tech. All right. So today I'm incredibly privileged because Peter Stuart with me. Peter, how are you?
I'm well, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing very well because I am here at SaugaTalks talking with fantastic leaders. We bring all the topics, all the angles from enterprise AI. Agentic AI is big now. All right. We talk about AI in business, adoption, hurdles, challenges, successes. Okay. That kind of the universe I live in right now. And today's topic is kind of unique to my conversations because, Peter, you were an editor in large publication. All right. And seeing the editor stepping off that seat and finding the way to start your own company, please talk to us why you did what you did.
Cool. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on. And yes, so my background is that I've always been in sort of publishing, writing, consumer journalism. Initially, I was in the print side of things. I worked for a magazine called Cyclist, and we sort of wrote about wonderful, expensive bikes and lovely places you could cycle. So we'd travel all over the world doing fun trips like that. And then I went to work for an independent magazine and help them sort of expand their digital kind of offering. And then most recently, I was the editor of Cyclingnews, which is the world's biggest editorial cycling website, where I had a team of 15 journalists in total. So a very large news operation with lots of different content output. Yeah, over the last kind of couple of years, I was noticing quite acutely the changes that were happening because of AI technology across publishing and across written content and more broader content. And working for a big publisher, kind of, seeing like smaller operators be more agile and kind of aggressive with AI kind of as a technology, I began to think about what the future looked like. And it reminded me a lot of when magazines and print journalism was kind of overtaken by digital journalism. And the same trend seemed to echo here, where you had sort of the incumbent large print operations not necessarily adapting quickly enough to the fact that the websites existed and the internet existed, and this was the behavior consumer change. So I thought, that time I was stuck in the print side, and this time I thought, well, what would it look like if I try and get out ahead of what AI is going to look like in publishing? So I basically started having a bit of a pipe dream to develop a kind of AI native publisher. Like, effectively, the sole vision was, if AI is baked in at the ground level, how would you plug it in a way that means that as the AI gets better, your publication gets better in many different ways? And that sort of relates largely to the front end of the website, obviously, like AI coding tools that can help you do very ambitious, impressive designs, and the kind of back end of the operation, the workflows that underpinned what we were doing. Yeah, I kind of had that as a pipe dream, and then I was sort of hammering out some ideas, but wasn't really like very actively pursuing it. When I met my co-founder Danny Bellion, who is an AI specialist who'd worked in fintech at Capital on Tap, one of the UK's quickest growing financial businesses, and he'd been the head of AI there. And we got talking at a barbecue. We used to race bikes together, and we had a few ideas here and there about what this could look like. He was kind of giving me insights from his AI perspective. And on the second time that we met up to discuss, like, just exchanging notes, he basically said, you know what, I think this is a cool idea. I'm actually happy to do it with you. Do you want to go full send, and we could both do this full time? And I hadn't really planned to quit my job and take the leap, but I think the opportunity sort of was just really ripe, and it was really cool to work with someone that was really kind of super literate with these emerging tools. And so we started, and that was back in November last year. And our first goal was to actually launch a publication using kind of AI tools, but then also using AI workflow. And that's what we did. We launched a publication for Velora Cycling, and it aimed to do like a smaller but similar kind of output to my previous title, but it aimed to do it while removing the sort of laborious kind of manual work that was often associated with publishing. So yeah, we did that and we launched that, but quite quickly after launching that, people sort of asked us about the processes we used behind the scenes, how we'd actually automated lots of these kind of tasks on the production side. And that automation kind of, a lot of it's very practical, like just taking an article and putting it on a website CMS, or like labeling images to say, this is the alt text of this image, this is the credit, or adding SEO fields and things like that. It's all very boring stuff, but it all takes editors quite a lot of time. And so we then sort of, in terms of doing that, and then also doing some of the research and some of the drafting elements that AI is able to do, people were interested in those tools, and so we started to develop a third-party platform where other publishers could use the same tools, and that's the Velora platform that we currently operate today.
Amazing, amazing. I mean, what you're doing is incredible. I mean, it takes guts, it takes intuition, and it takes, of course, practical approach, because otherwise it will be just still dreams and ideas, all right? So let's talk a little bit about AI in writing and in journalism in general, because right now, again, people playing with a bunch of tools you mentioned, right? I mean, there's opportunities everywhere. Thing is how to move from generic AI, all right, and how, you know, readers and customers and clients, right, feel that it's authentic brand, authentic creator talks to you, or journalist, of course, rather than seeing all this blah, blah, blah text now that's really automated and not sending the right vibe at all.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's definitely it's a really important part of this whole project, and I think from the outset, it's obviously been very difficult to talk about AI in like writing and journalism without sort of associations that people might immediately make to what the early output of like AI in scaled content looked like, and that's when you might have had publications that were publishing thousands of articles within a month, and a lot of it would be very basic aggregation or like very, very thin content that was being produced at scale by an AI with very little human intervention. Equally, I think, you know, the overall trust issue with AI is that AI obviously hallucinates AI in its chat responses, and you know, AI, you're not sure where the source is. There's not that much kind of traceability in outputs. So I think from the outset, with the way we developed the platform, we thought a lot about firstly, like where AI can be used in writing and where it's probably less appropriate. And there's obviously different areas and of writing. And sometimes, let's say if you have an opinion piece or a commentary piece, I think it's quite normal to expect that that is largely the output of someone's honestly held opinion that they've put down on paper. They may use AI tools to like neaten the output, or they may use AI tools to check some facts. But it's important that that's their perspective. They're saying, I've written this article, this is my view, and that's why I'm communicating to you. That's the value. Whereas sometimes a lot of journalism, and this is probably what isn't always so obvious to people that haven't worked in journalism, especially specialist journalism, a lot of it is kind of quite informational led. So it might be that you have a press release about an event or a new product or a team announcement, and you kind of just have a service to your readers to turn this article into some written copy to say, okay, the Tour de France is on, the biggest team has announced their team list, here's who is on the team. And, you know, tradition and sort of Google's algorithm dictates that you can't just take the press release and put it on the page. So you often editors and writers spend a lot of time just basically rewriting this material with a bit of added context. And my view was always that that didn't really benefit the human insight and the human creativity you spend time doing that. So our view was that, well, if we can use an AI tool to, in a very effective way, take these kind of low-lift press release pieces of content and turn them into a written copy, and that frees up more time for more original reporting and original insight. And even within that article, if you spend only 2 minutes creating the kind of list of the team of the riders and the kind of general context of the team that's been selected, that gives you as a writer time to think, okay, well, now I can spend more time perhaps writing my own perspective within this and saying, I think this team selection is interesting because it reflects that they are putting this rider in the kind of critical lead position. So basically, kind of what we would demarcate ourselves as like AI drafted content would be content that like there isn't so much perspective in. We're just trying to do something quite mechanical. And then with other content, we sometimes use AI tools to help us create, say, long form features. But where the AI comes in is that we use AI to transcribe articles and then to go through a transcription and identify to us areas that it thinks is interesting to go about creating a draft. And then there becomes a sort of a like conversation between the writer and the AI tool to say, okay, what should I include? Do you think this is interesting? How about this? And there's a sort of a challenge level that you don't really get as an individual writer, but AI tools are very good at looking at lots of material and saying, this is what's interesting, or this is unexpected, or did you notice that 25 minutes in, they didn't really answer this question? And that's been a really interesting process in terms of how AI can help writing in a way that, you know, in the past, certainly I've spent maybe 2 days transcribing articles and, you know, just rewriting them from recorded audio. But even then, sometimes missing really interesting parts of an interview because you as the interviewer haven't always listened to like the bits that a fresh set of ears would listen to. So that's where AI becomes really interesting. But I think with using AI for any kind of written content, it's really important to separate quite distinctly from the way that a chatbot or a single prompt would create a piece of content. And the important bits there are that you need to know kind of traceability, like where is the source of the information that you're writing from? What is the kind of research that's gone into it? What is that piece of work relying on? And then also beyond that sort of tone of voice. But you had a question there.
Yes, because you brought so many interesting angles, Peters. We know AI hallucinate, right? It's not a question anymore. It's just a matter of, right, which again platform you use and how you can handle, right, the edgy cases. The thing is, I think your team came up with fact laundering idea. All right. Could you talk to us a little bit about how if AI pulls correct information, right, and then they cite their own source? What do you do with that? I mean, because this is like everybody, you don't have to be a journalist to even face this problem. Everyone who writes blogs, newsletters, LinkedIn posts, YouTube scripts, right? They all find this kind of problem. So what's your approach to this?
Yeah, so we have many different sort of elements of the platform that we built to deal with this exact problem of accuracy and traceability and sort of attribution. And so the first thing that happens when our pipeline, our sort of platform identifies an interesting story, and that's part of the thing the platform will do on its own. It will take a large amount of input, whether that's press releases, social media accounts, like websites from teams or brands or other kind of international press, and it will sort of rank interesting stories. When it finds an interesting story that it thinks is relevant to your audience, it will do a custom level of deep research on that story, and that deep research is something we designed. But one of the key elements of it is that we wanted to know whenever we had a story that was surfaced in our platform or was identified as a lead, and that might be a story that you could have found from spending an hour looking through lots of social media accounts, or it could have been something that's just in your inbox you can see. We wanted to know, okay, what's the wider context? So as a writer would do, like, okay, what's going on with the story? What's actually happening? What's happened before? What's happened? What's the impact? But we also wanted to know what was the actual original source of the story. We don't want to say this was reported by somebody else. We want to say, okay, was this originally from that particular? Was a statement made by the individual covered by the source publicly? Was it made on their social channels? Was it made in an interview to one specific kind of publication? And so we ran lots of kind of tests and evaluations, and we actually created a benchmark as well to see research tools that could get to the original source, and that was a challenge we set. My co-founder Danny Bellion has published a benchmark for what we call the Journo bench, and that effectively analyzes how good is each commercial research tool at reaching the original source and saying this is the source that you should refer to. My view with that stuff is equally that a journalist should also go look at the original source and confirm, even though the AI tool is very good at surfacing it and it doesn't usually misrepresent what was mentioned. You should go and see, okay, I'm happy that this is the source and that's a credible title, and that's where this information comes from. Now, I think the fact kind of laundering you mentioned, this probably might be related to something I said to Ulrike, which is that sometimes hallucinations, there's two things that can happen with information being misspread, and that's because you can get hallucinations that are made by, let's say, one person relying maybe in part on an AI tool to write a story that hallucinates, and that's picked up by other publications. And that's something that our tools have noticed before. Our verification tool has once flagged that and said that this article was the source of a story, of a quote, but the publication it references never made this quote. But equally, one other thing which is much rarer, I think, that I mentioned to Ulrike, was just that sometimes you will get sources of stories that themselves kind of spam stories, and that's not spam that is in a spam domain. It's spam that would be a parasite SEO piece of content. So often, like, a large website might be hijacked effectively, and part of their website output is taken over by a sort of hackers and putting out lots of content to try and game SEO. So that's the only other time that we've ever encountered something that was sort of misleading. But again, because our tool showed us the original source, we were able to see, okay, while this is a high authority website and the tool wouldn't cite it if it wasn't a high authority website, this particular article is actually in itself a huge spam hallucination type article. But those steps are really important for the researcher. But equally at the other end of our workflow, so when we have an AI drafting tool, you can use the AI drafting tool, you can write based on the research yourself manually in the platform. But the AI drafting tool it completes the first draft, and then within it has a verification layer that initially looks at the full piece of content against the research, and then does a sort of test of verification with the different agents. So it's not the same one that wrote the piece. And then beyond that, we then have a deep verification layer that conducts a new grounded search against everything said in the article and tries to find a grounded search piece of kind of source that has that claim in it. So then you have those kind of 3 levels of verification that mean that by the time something reaches a final point of approval by an editor, it's already had so many separate searches done on it to ensure that this information exists and is not a hallucination, that it is in theory very hard for anything to reach that level. And then on top of that, it's just a draft, so the editor is responsible to say, this I know to be correct, this is an interesting claim, so I'm going to double check it. But the verification tools that we have inside the platform are very, very robust, and that helps a lot. But I think it's not always obvious to our sort of to people on the outside who may assume that effectively it's one tool that does everything. It's this kind of combination of different agentic processes that makes the general kind of article creation much more robust than you might have from many kind of historic ways of doing it, or like ways that sort of definitely sacrifice trust in AI written output, where you have gaffes or things that weren't true, quotes misattributed, or the more silly examples of people saying at the end of an article, would you like me to put that in an email format or something? And it's obviously the end of a ChatGPT response. So yeah, I think it's just like working very hard at verification layers, at sort of testing and validation, to mean that we think we have a process, we feel confident we have a process where the workflow is very robust, and the age of like rampant hallucinations I think is kind of broadly less common than it was in any chatbot, but certainly in the orchestration you have in our platform becomes very, very difficult, and it's not something that it would naturally come about. It's only in a very, very edge case where you'd see very misleading information reach a sort of final draft.
Yeah, what's the role of human editor in this new workflow that you're describing? Because it looks like, right, we can automate the AI checking on AI. And again, of course, the tools getting more mature as we speak. All right. So next month, it will be, I'm sure, different models, different ways to handle some of these, of course, challenges. So what's the human role in this now?
Yeah, I think for now, and I think you're right, what you say, the benchmark constantly moves. I think it's important with any of this, with any of these kind of agentic processes. And I think it's also worth mentioning that I think while we're quite public with our process, we think this is a similar process and workflow that's used increasingly in different publications. So it isn't sort of totally novel to us, but we think, we've spoken to people that have said, actually, we have a similar process that has evolved over time. So it's become kind of the natural standard, I think, for like responsible use of AI content. But I think the human needs to come in 3 separate points to actually make it robust for now, certainly. And that's sort of creating the orchestration of what this platform would look like. So being clear about, we want this platform to look at these sources. We want this to be the kind of key interest area. We effectively create the architecture of what we want our publication to look like and what we want our publication to prioritize. Then I think the author, the writer, and the editor needs to then come in at a point where you have, say, lots of leads and stories to say, I think this story should exist, this story should be created, this story is interesting. So that's kind of an effectual kind of taste in your taste and sort of editorial oversight on a title. But I think for now, certainly, I think it's very critical that a person always has the last touch point with an article and is the one to say, I am happy for this to be published out in the wild. And I think there's an interesting question there that often comes up about sort of authorship, and I think it's a really valid one, about, should articles like that have a byline of, say, Claude or something, rather than an individual's byline. And I think the important bit there is not about sort of false kind of authorship in terms of saying, oh, I'm claiming credit for this. I think the reason that there needs to be authorship associated with that, and whatever form becomes the standard, is because I think a person needs to take responsibility for it. If it's incorrect, you can't just say, this is the fault of machine-created copy. I think the person needs to be the one that says, no, I checked this, I'm responsible for it being incorrect. That's on me, and I need to be the one to apologize, and I need to reevaluate the processes that I used, or how careful I was in publishing this material. So in my view, those are the 3 steps that need 3 key points that need to be editor kind of involvement. But I also think, and I've discussed this a few times with people, that I think there might become an increasing standard where there's an expectation that you have some level of AI verification, almost because realistically we're approaching a point at which AI verification tools or AI tools used in verification will start to kind of exceed the ability of people to do the same thing in a reasonable amount of time. And I'm not saying that that means that the person doesn't verify, but I think there might be a point where AI tools very, very soon are able to do a very in-depth check of an article, are able to confirm quotes, are able to confirm research, are able to confirm someone's age, someone's like place of birth, whatever, anything that's included in the article, and return a sort of very, very in-depth verification report very, very quickly. And while in an ideal world, publications would have fact checkers to do all of these things, and they did used to do that 20 years ago, it's not realistically financially sustainable anymore. So I think that AI tools, while a person is critical in verification, I think it might become increasingly standard that we expect AI tools to play a part in verification and fact checking as well.
You brought fantastic point, okay? I ask a lot of my guests about roles in organizations, okay? How do you see that industry changing, the publishing industry changing altogether? Because you mentioned few important tasks that, again, we now can delegate to AI, but at the same time, right? They gotta be human touch, they gotta be human responsibility, right? So could you please describe the ideal organization that operates in this new environment now?
Yeah, I think the way that things should work ideally is that organizations need to begin to assess what value they are adding in terms of what they're bringing to their readership, what their existence as a publication means. And I think when they do that, then quite quickly you'll begin to understand different areas of their output, and those different areas might lend themselves to more editor human kind of oversight, and different areas might be more appropriate for AI related tools. So if as an example, if you're a cycling website and people come to your website to see the results of a bike race, purely just the information, we can maybe say that AI tools may very soon be able to gather that information and repeat it in a much more effective way than people would be able to. And a person spending hours trying to kind of compile this information just can't compete with a machine to do that. Equally, if you're just trying to talk about, say, new kind of new building projects in Chicago, and that's one of your website's content outputs, it may be that a machine is much better at an AI tool is much better at scanning a large amount of inputs, large amount of press releases, a large amount of alerts across the city, and surfacing that to readers. But I think at the same time, most publications and most brands that exist have a perspective and have an insight that is really valuable and people value that brand for. And I think we then need to think, okay, maybe people should be spending more time defining what this brand stands for, what its meaning is, what its perspectives are, and spend more time trying to offer their own personal insights, offer their own opinions that form sort of a more engaging relationship with the reader. And at the same time, I think we probably also need to think more about making journalists more personal, sort of, identifiable kind of creators in a way. And that's probably, in my view, more likely to be what the future looks like, where automation sort of begins to take over a large part of aggregation work or just pure informational work, and insights, perspective, maybe thought leadership and things become more what we expect people in organizations and publishing organizations to do. But I'll make a caveat, and I say these things, I'm not designing this new world, so I'm not intending that this is how things are going to look. But I think we have to be realistic that the world of who will do this work may become smaller because there isn't more demand for this kind of content. But a lot of this content can now be created much more cheaply. So, whether people will sort of even use newspapers or websites to find very informational kind of facts, or just ask a chatbot, is a big question. But equally, whether there are competitors that will start to do this at very, very low cost to talk about all the building projects in Chicago very, very cheaply with AI tools, that will change the sort of value that those people who are writing and doing that work manually they're offering, even if it hasn't sort of impacted the publication yet. That shift in values already happened as soon as AI tools have been able to do these tasks. So in my view, I think we need to lean into the human and lean into the expertise and insights and make kind of perspectives that people value, and then automate as much as we can around that. And I'd probably stand out being a bit more pro sort of writing automation than most, but I think realistically, these writing tools are getting so effective that there's less and less value in saying we think a person should write this very informational press release type article, because the AI tool just becomes better at it. And then, you know, we may have social questions about whether that's the best thing to happen, but it is still the best. That is still just the reality. That's what's happened. That if an AI tool has become better at writing this and it can do it in 15 seconds, it doesn't serve anyone to have somebody set aside 2 hours to do it.
Have you seen some particular productivity gains, okay, results that can be measurable? So could you share maybe, I don't know, success stories? You don't have to name client name or anything, but some project that, yeah, really teams saw the fantastic results.
Yeah, yeah, we've had lots of these cases of people sort of reallocating their time. So I think as we've shared sort of LinkedIn and stuff at the moment, we have around 10 clients and 10 publishers that work with us. Of those, like, you know, I think they've generally seen, and my co-founder published something a few days ago, an uplift in traffic of not dramatic, not hundreds of percent, but like 60, 70% increase in traffic as a normalized average. And generally what we've always had the feedback of is that they've had time back to do other things. And in different cases, different publishers, that has a big impact on the rest of their business, because increasingly across the specialist publishing landscape, probably just writing content on a website is not the only thing you will do, because a lot of time the monetization is more significant in, say, like events or other commercial activities you might be doing as a brand, like working on something, client kind of content or something like that. So what our clients have told us is they've had a lot of time back. Sort of, you know, a 3 or 4 hour job has been reduced to a 30-minute job. So their morning news tasks have been much, much quicker. And from one client, we had a really great use case and case study there, which was that they were previously spending a lot of time and freelance budget just to kind of cover their sector in a ton of like in terms of just covering it on a news perspective. And this news was often very functional. It was like quarterly results. They were a financial title. And by using our tool that would then firstly find the financial results that person was interested by looking at SEC and companies' house filings, and then sort of draft them, they were able to effectively get all of that time back. And instead of sort of commissioning people to write up these kind of low lift but kind of quite factual stories, they then invested the same budget into somebody spending more time doing original interviews and original insight. And they saw generally an uplift in traffic, but also just the general content mix that was much healthier for their website. And that was kind of a liberating factor of the AI tool that kind of gave them time back, but also let them shift their focus. So they were suddenly able to commission, say, 2 interviews a week rather than no interviews a week. So those are the benefits we've seen so far in small organizations. And yeah, I think that's our dream for this, really, that we want journalists to spend time doing things that are generally interesting, creative, involve insight, like, and generally better their kind of business, but also interest them to do, and just remove all the manual work that now, you know, we know that AI agents are able to do, sometimes as good, sometimes even better in some cases.
What about some disasters? Okay, people remember, you know, some of the mistakes others making. We don't learn from our own mistakes, forget about somebody else's, but it's still, I think, worth mentioning. I mean, some projects that may not be going as well, and again, some lesson learned that you can share.
Our projects that aren't going well.
Scenario.
I think we have,
okay, you don't have to spill the beans. It's not about that. It's rather, hey, are there some situations, I would say, right? You would you know, ask people to avoid, because again, we're all running into mistakes.
Yeah, I think the most common thing, and this is maybe an easier one for me to say, and I'll give an example of one of our personal mistakes, like, well, not quite a mistake, but an example of where we think we wouldn't go again. But I think generally, and this isn't something we've done, but generally a lot of people, when they've come to the possibilities of AI and content, they've tried to like massively increase their output of work. And, you know, you might have a website that would start publishing, say, 20 articles, and all these articles are very kind of thin or low quality. So they would say, okay, everything that happens on social media of any interest or anything that's published by our competitors will publish as well. And generally, I think this has been the tactic that's been really heavily punished by most kind of platforms, specifically Google. And because that information is increasingly thin and offers no unique value compared to what exists elsewhere, a lot of those brands have seen themselves just kind of removed altogether from Google's index. So it's not even that they're not ranking or they're not surfacing, it's that you can't even find the articles anymore. And Google, obviously, as most listeners would know, is where most traffic on the internet, vast majority, like 90% plus, it kind of originates. So I think that's like a misstep, and that's a kind of strategic thing that actually did work for a little while. Like there was a time when AI tools were quite early, but people managed to have this large scaling, kind of content scaling, and it worked for them, and they were able to get quite large audiences and monetize it well. But that doesn't really work anymore. And I think increasingly, given that equally, Google has its own AI tools that it uses to aggregate stuff, it's very hard to compete with that. So I think the increasing value is in trying to kind of automate what you feel like your direct audience, people that come to your website, might expect to see, or stuff that you think serves your niche very well, but then focusing much more on unique and differentiated content. And that's what we tried to build onto our platform, like ways to measure that and say, if you've written an article, you can then run it against other articles in the search engine result page. And if it's shown to be derivative, we have a sort of a uniqueness test that will tell you that you should either hold it or rewrite it, or just try and reimagine that story to be more effective. So yeah, I think that's one misstep we see from a lot of other people. And then obviously with that scale, the other thing that happens quite commonly is that there's very little human oversight. And AI tools are getting a lot better, but they still, if you're trusting like an AI tool to supervise like hundreds of articles a day, lots and lots of significant mistakes will creep through, and it lacks the context to sometimes see how kind of inappropriate or like kind of out of like how something slips out of frame of reference and isn't a good fit for an article, or things just can be totally incorrect. And if let's say one AI tool has written it and there isn't another sort of grounded tool checking it, it can just be that completely fabricated incidents or fabricated quotes creep out, or things that are just kind of slightly nonsensical, because we have to remember that AI tools don't have lived experiences, and they can't always identify specialist fields when things just don't make any sense anymore. So I think that's where we see the very worst sides of AI implementation in publishing and consumer publishing. Probably the only areas that I think we thought we wouldn't do it again. So in the early days, we were kind of interested in like just purely because our project was about being AI native, AI video, but we discovered that AI video really isn't something that people like find that engaging. Like certainly, there's a whole world of like AI kind of slop that people enjoy on TikTok that is like fruit dramas and things like this, and very, very silly videos. But I think with any sort of real kind of like publishing output, it's not something that resonates with people. And I think we were in Munich last week, and there was an example of this publisher called Welt, which is part of Axel Springer, that tried to use an AI avatar to tell the news. But the output was kind of quite useful, but people just didn't like the fact it was an AI avatar. It really put them off the whole nature of the news delivery. So they just kind of shelved that idea. And that's something we never really published that much AI video, but we tried it a bit, just internally. We thought, this isn't interesting, this isn't good, this is just kind of like, content for content's sake, and it doesn't have any value to it. And if anything, we went the other way, that we do quite a lot of video content, but we rely much more on authentic captured moments from races with like very, very real, very, very candid moments that we kind of pay some of our contributors to collect when they're at races. And that's very, very effective. So it's the exact opposite. There's no kind of curation, it's just very pure, real video. So I think that's one area that I would say that, leaning into like authentic and video terms, like thinking AI can help with video editing or can help with video strategy, but I think pure video creation and same image creation maybe isn't something that is going to be very useful in this context where people are expecting kind of authenticity and truth in terms of like consumer journalism. And then the only other place we maybe had an interesting experiment was partly for our own validation, but was where we created a website just in tandem to my own efforts, where an AI agent was doing the same job as me, and we ran that for a few weeks, and the AI agent was meant to be doing what I was doing. And the interesting part of that was, and I think it comes back to that kind of like an AI tool overseeing something at scale, just wasn't really able to have any taste or exercise any real judgment in the same way. And the output was kind of, and the content it created was more or less useless. And that was a really interesting perspective for us. And we never really wanted to have like an totally autonomous website, but we were just interested to see that at that scale, an AI agent or an AI tool wasn't able to do it in an effective way. So that's where you definitely still need the human in the loop, which was verification for our whole concept. But yeah, we sort of we discovered a lot from just doing that test in terms of like where the limitations are, which was fun.
Peter, this is precious. This is absolutely precious. I learned a lot today. I'm sure audience will find the value in our conversation. Here is my point. I encourage everyone to follow Peter, to follow Velora. Where people can find you, Peter? What's the best way to reach out?
Yeah, follow me on LinkedIn. Peter Stuart, STUART on LinkedIn. You can check out our cycling editorial website, veloracycling.com, and our business sort of platform site is velora.build. Yeah, I'm always happy to. The platform is like is an open platform available to anyone. And we offer free trials for people that would like to think about it with their own publishing stacks. I'm also just happy to discuss ideas with people. If someone has sort of developed their own kind of agentic workflow in publishing or editorial, I'm always interested to compare notes, because I think it's really valuable that we start to kind of converge on like best practices and understand projects that worked and projects that haven't worked, and see kind of collectively, where this technology is going and where the sort of where the boundaries are sort of maturing towards with what an AI tool can help us do and what an AI tool can't help us do.
Fantastic, Peter. I so value your time. Thank you. Thank you very much for joining me. In conclusion, could you please close out with maybe a few takeaways, okay? A few advices for people who starting with AI, who adapting AI in publishing or some other industries?
Yeah, I'll just have a think about that for a second. I think my overall thing that I'd say, and this is obviously something that happens with enterprise a lot of the time, is that I think because you have some contradictions or some challenges with using AI, that you think, oh, we're worried that AI may make mistakes in written output or in research. I think a lot of people will use that as a reason to not experiment with AI, but I think it's very important to experiment with this technology because it's obvious that this is going to be the kind of dominant technology in the foreseeable future, and understand what it's capable of and how it may benefit you and how it may not benefit you. So I think I'd always encourage, certainly in enterprise level, lots of hackathons and vibe coded ideas and creativity from super users of the platforms that are creating say journalism, so that the people that use the CMS will do the writing to actually develop their own tools. And I think it's always important to be sort of conservative about when something goes into production, but I think people often are too reticent to begin experimenting and begin sort of exploring what's possible with AI tools. On that front as well, I think probably the other advice I'd have is that I think in our perspective, and we're not, a billion-pound company, and most likely never will be, but I think if we've been successful in one way, I think it's that myself and Danny have always been extremely close in our development of the product, and the key benefit there is that I've always been the super user. I've always been the person that has the expertise about using this platform and creating content. So I think a lot of the time it's easy to kind of develop an idea, but if you're abstracted away from your kind of super user or the person that needs to see the gain, you may not develop a really good product, because it's no longer expensive or scarce to develop software that can do things like, if you're developing an AI tool for woodworking trade or something like that, I think it's important that you work daily with someone that works in that trade, or a carpenter, and that you're actually able to understand their challenges and their friction. And I think that's where, in terms of developing a whole workflow and a agentic process, where we had a big benefit, because Danny, my co-founder, even though he was very kind of understanding and he had spent a lot of time reading content, he never really knew firsthand what it involves. So the things that he initially would have solved for weren't necessarily the problems that I was facing. And the problems I was facing, a lot of time, he couldn't really conceive why the problems, or why they were time consuming, or what the specific solution was. So I think gearing your solutions around a really clear problem is one of the most important things I'd say about working with AI software and technology. And to do that, I think it's really important to work with someone that has a lived experience of that sector, of working in that sector.
Precious, absolutely precious. Peter, thank you so very much. Much success to Velora and the team, and just incredible. So we'll stay in touch. Thanks a lot.
Thanks so much, Irene. Thank you. Thanks for having me.